Hello and welcome back to another Political Insight with TVC22. I'm your host, Thomas Stockton. Today I've got the pleasure of introducing a brand new guest, someone who's never been on the show before and until recently you may not have even seen popping up on your screens across the city. This is the new appointed councillor for Ward 2. It is Mr. Kyle, so thank you very much for joining us today. Mr. How are you?
I'm very fine, thank you very much for the invitation and having me here.
Absolutely, you're very welcome. Are you okay if I call you Kyle? Do you mind?
Yes,
right?
let's go Kyle, yes.
Opposite tutoyer, like you say in French. Perfect stuff. Just a reminder for the listeners as well that there is a French version of this interview which is available as well. Just have a hunt on that Facebook feed or on our YouTube channel. And if you're watching this on TVC22's cable channel, then it will loop back around soon, so don't you worry about that. So, Mr. Sear, Kyle, before we go any further, really, I think it's a great occasion to be able to tell the listeners, people out there who might not know you. I know you're going to get into it, born and raised here, lived here your whole life, but obviously Clarence-Rockland has grown exponentially in the last couple of decades with a bunch of brand new people, new faces such as myself, even, kicking around these days. So if you could tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, where you're from, and I think I'm correct in saying that you're involved in politics locally before as well, so a little bit about that if you don't mind too.
Yeah, so like I was mentioning, I've always lived in the city of Clarence-Rockland. I grew up in Ward 5 in Clarence-Creek, attended school there, and then came here to L'Escale, and then studied leisure studies at La Cité Collégiale, did all my education in French. And then one summer I applied to a federal internship program at the federal government and got a job at a deputy minister's office. And that is basically where I got la piqued politique,
the bug for politics. Yeah.
That's it. So then following that I decided to attend university in political science. And that's where I really got into it. So no, I've been living. I actually lived in Rockland probably till up to grade 4 actually, and then we moved to Clarence-Creek, had the hobby farm. But I've been in the city of Clarence-Rockland all my life, and I've been engaged since I think it was 14, 15 in community organizations. I just like. I can't say sit still, so I always have to be doing something. And I remember even like 15, 16 being involved in baseball, coaching at that young age, and then hockey, junior hockey, and then I got into politics in 2003. So 2003, I first decided I was actually taking the bus going to work. And I met Richard Lalonde, and he said, have you ever thought running? And I said, well, not yet. And he said, well, maybe you should. And I did, and in 2003 I won. And then back then there were terms, 3-year terms. So and then 2006 was acclaimed, so no opponent, and I decided at the end of my last term not to run again. I had kids that were turning into teenagers and they needed someone. I just wanted to be home more often, and my career as a public servant was also taking off, so I decided to put that aside, put politics aside, because at the end of the day, you got to pay the bills, and these, although sometimes it feels like a full-time job, these are part-time jobs. So I put politics aside for a while. I always said I'd be back, and this opportunity came. They were looking for someone to replace Mr. Zanth in Ward 2, and I applied, and here I am.
So talk to me a little bit more about obviously your time back as a politician in the early 2000s as well. You said you were living in Clarence-Creek at the time, so I take it you represented Ward 5 then, and it was 3-year terms. You're a younger man. How did you find the whole process then?
Oh, it was fun, but it was hard because I was 27, and all the other councillors, including the mayor, were all over 50. And everything was paper. we weren't in the digital age yet. Like we didn't even have cell phones or email addresses, believe it or not. So we'd get everything every Friday. We'd get a binder full of documents that we'd have to read through, and the first couple of years were difficult. It's a learning curve, like any new job. But that's where I really got the, like I said, this thing for politics. That piqued is though that first mandate. I had fun, and meeting the people and being able to influence the process and influence the result of an activity, of a project is something I like. And so yeah, it brought me to the second term, and you know, after 2 terms I was ready to, you know, priorities changed. The kids were getting older, and I was, like I mentioned, I was taking off. My career was taking off in the public service, so I put it aside. But yeah, a lot of things have changed since that. Like that's been 11 years. The city has boomed. There's like, it's amazing how much the city has grown. But the issues are the same, you know, crosswalks, public safety. Environment is probably a bit more important now than it was back then, obviously.
At least with a greater understanding.
Yeah. Exactly, people have a greater understanding, and I think you know, there's been a lot of expansion in residential expansion everywhere, in Bourget and Hammond, in Cheney, in Clarence, and here in Rockland. So I think that, you know, we got to look at our infrastructure too. A lot of people are coming in, so the issues are similar, but you know, there's always a different twist at things 11 years later.
Yeah, really interesting. You say 11 years later, you talk about some of these issues like they were literally issues of today as they were issues of yesterday for you. And you can hear just within yourself talking there that there is clearly a political interest that never died, even though you left. So, I mean, it kind of makes the next question a little bit obsolete. But what really did pique that interest when obviously Mayor Zanth, who was Councilor Zanth for Ward 2, as you mentioned beforehand, took that step up into the mayor position following the passing, obviously, of late Monsieur Guy Desjardins. What really piqued your interest to go, I'm gonna, you know what, actually there's a position here and I think I'm the right man for this role?
Yeah, well, I even before the position came available, I had just purchased a place in Rockland here, and I had in my plan that I was gonna come back next year. So right now I'm living just in Ward 1, just probably 500 feet from Ward 2. But, so I was planning to go next year. This opportunity arose, and I said, okay, well, you know, why not? I'll apply and we'll see how it goes. And I applied, and selection committee made the decision, and I'm thankful for the opportunity. I have a lot of experience. I think they were looking for somebody, given the short time frame before next year's election, they were looking probably for somebody who could hit the ground running, who understands all the processes. We were right in the budgetary process, so I've done 7 of them. And again, the process is different, but the outcome is the same. So no, I would, like I mentioned, I was planning to seek election next year, but this opportunity arose, and I said, well, why not? It's put my name and we'll see where it goes. So no, I'm happy I made the decision, and it's been busy and it's been fun, and we have a good group of councillors there, different views, different takes at things, but that's politics. And at the end of the day, we have different opinion, different take, but you know, we all rally, and we respect each other, and it's a good group.
Yeah, I mean, well, we'll dive into a little bit the group president at the moment, as well as touching on a little bit about that budgetary process, because it is a huge process for the city every single year. And as you say, you popped in the door just before it commenced. Obviously, some local, and I'm curious to hear your insight on this, having obviously you're councillor now, you were councillor before, you got a political bug long beforehand, as well as working in the federal government too. Some local residents have questioned the democratic process at the moment, being no ability to really speak to councillors during those council meetings, which has been a little bit of a frustration, but one that I feel like residents have accepted due to the pandemic. And obviously your appointment was an election. It wasn't an election, it was an appointment. You speak there about hitting the ground running as well. Do you feel it was the right move for the council to seek someone out in the way you did rather than going for an election with especially with such a short time left on the mandate?
Yeah, I think so. If they didn't do it for the mayor, it would be hard to justify doing it for a councillor. And again, it's a big expense for 1 year. And by having it open, anybody could have applied, you know, without running a campaign, without any funding required. So I think it was the right decision. I know back when I was back in 2003, we had a similar. The mayor, Jean-Pierre Père, back then, and a councillor stepped aside I think it was 1 year within the term, and instead of, you know, council has, the municipal act allows for council to decide to have an election or, you know, seek nominations and have a selection committee. Again, you know, I think with 1 year left, having an election would have cost money, would have taken time. This way, anybody who was interested could have applied and seek nomination or seek appointment.
Yeah, as you say, especially during another pandemic year where money is so short by as well. So probably a wise decision to say that. Touching on the initial part of my question as well, which wasn't actually a question, but I might as well ask. How do you, because again, when you say it was printed, paper being printed and all this, back when you were previously a councillor, now it's digital, but now as well on top of that you've got this element where it's just all broadcasted live and there isn't so much that face-to-face interaction with the public. How do you find that? Do you think it is a bit that is truly missing from the local democratic process as well? And do you think we should be hurrying to try and get back to that?
Yes, the answer is yes, and it was my first question I asked Ms. Collier and Mr. Mayor was like, when are we getting back? We got to get back. Yes, people can email us. They could call us, but the democratic process is all about people having the right to express themselves and seek questions to or answers to their questions. So I'd like to see us get back to full council as soon as possible. I know the City of Ottawa is looking at January. I know the United Counties have come back in a hybrid model, and I think the hybrid model would work for us too. People are still concerned about COVID, obviously, and you know, we wouldn't want to create a super spreader at a town council meeting. So, but no, you know, having it on Facebook is a good thing. People get to see what we're talking about and get to follow us live. But we need to get back as soon as possible, where you know, we could come and meet. People could come and meet us, ask their question, and you know, seek guidance or seek responses to their concerns. And but it's fun to be able to go to the hockey game and see people now. It must have been very difficult during lockdown, where you know, you couldn't meet your councillor at the local grocery store or at the hockey game. Everything was closed. So. I think we need to look at, you know, like the United Counties, a hybrid model to allow people to come in and maybe have the directors virtually, because although the work is important, the citizens don't come and see the directors, or the administration. They want to see their councillor, they want to see the mayor. So you know, maybe having a hybrid model where you'd have, you know, the city staff online and us there would be an option.
Yeah.
So,
as much as the directors do get pulled on screen, you're absolutely right. The accountability falls on the elected officials, and rightly so. Speaking of the elected officials and obviously your colleagues at the moment, how have you found the dynamic within the current council? It must have been a little bit odd coming so late into the day. I mean, some of these councillors have worked together for the last 7 years. So how did you find sort of stepping into that dynamic? Because on top of that, you then got the other bizarrity of the fact that the Mayor, Mario Zanth, was a councillor who's just been elected amongst his peers to go up to the position of mayor too. So that's already an interesting dynamic. And then we had a newcomer in there as well. Can you give us a little peek behind the curtain? What's that been like over the last couple of months?
It's actually been quite welcoming. I knew before being a councillor the vast majority of those, and Mr. Bouchard I went to school with, Monsieur Lalonde, I knew Mr. Cardarelli, Mr. Small. So I knew a lot of them, and no, they've been good. They've been patient. I think they recognize too that I have a certain amount of experience, which they appreciate. And like I mentioned before, you know, and for those who saw the budget deliberations, you know, we all have different views on things, but at the end of the day, you know, we're a team, and we're all working for the common good, which is, you know, the advancement of the city of Clarence-Rockland. And it's a like I mentioned before, when I was the first time I was in politics, I was 27. Everybody was over 50. Mm-hmm. Now we're all at the same age, so it's different. You know, we have the same interests. We're at the same, you know, we have kids at the same age. We're all working the next day. Back in 2003, council meetings would go till 11:30, 12 o'clock. I was the only one who needed to get up in the morning at 6 to drive 2 hours up Highway 17 to get to work. Most of the other councillors were, including Mr. Desjardins back then, mm-hmm. were you know, either working from home or entrepreneurs, or Lalonde was retired. So, no, it's a good group. Again, I from day one, I was welcomed. The administration is very, very averse in the sense that they're very, very knowledgeable in their own domain. Mm-hmm. The reports that we get are complete, lots of information. So no, it's been good.
You mentioned obviously the budget element of it, and we mentioned it earlier as well. We couldn't not talk about it sitting down here a couple of weeks after, well, like 10 days obviously after the budgetary deliberation process and prior to its official approval amongst council. You obviously had some different ideas of everything. Well, all your colleagues had slightly different ideas of what when you said earlier, the budgetary process has one main goal, and that really is about setting that municipal tax rate, finding what taxpayers are going to have to pay for the next budgetary year. And everyone has slightly differing opinions. In the end, it's settled at about 2.95%. You were pushing for it to be a little bit lower than that. Can you talk us through why you were aiming for so much lower than some of your other councillors who are happy with a good 1.5% higher than what you wanted to see?
Yeah, I think it's our duty to bring it as low as possible as we can. We're coming out of a pandemic. Mm-hmm. People are hurting, and I think that was the point I was trying to make with my fellow colleagues. I'm lucky. I still have a job, but there's a lot of people there who don't. And people have, and we're not out of it yet. We're not out of it yet. We're looking maybe at a new wave is hitting Australia, hitting England. We're not out of it yet, and I think we have the obligation to bring it down to the lowest possible rate we can. And again, you know, what is that rate? I don't know. We're in a very good financial situation at the city of Clarence-Rockland, and I just thought that, you know, given that we were the council there before me were fiscally responsible, well, maybe we could put a little less in the reserve this year to be able to give taxpayers a bigger break this year, acknowledging the hardship that everybody's living through with a different degree caused by the pandemic. So you mentioned we're at 2.95, I think.
Yeah, I think that's what it was. The last declared one. Who knows what it's going to be? Obviously, when you guys come back and have a chat about it in a few days.
I think we're going to talk about it on Monday. But we'll definitely, you know, I think we could squeeze the lemon again. And there's different schools of thought. You know, some politicians will say, let's target inflation. Mm-hmm. Well, that's nice when inflation is normal. We're not in a normal inflationary year. I think inflation is at 4.2%. Given COVID, given the as a result of COVID, with the gas, the supply chain shortages, the houses, the price of the houses, everything, all the the collateral damage that COVID caused to the supply chain impacts inflation. So to come and say, well, let's do rate of inflation in a normal year, I'd say yes, 2-3%, but we can't go to 4. And like I mentioned before, I think, I know that, a lot of people are having hard times during this period and have lost their jobs. And will be, I think we have a duty to bring it down to what was, lowest rate possible. So we'll see where we end up on Monday. But again, I'm looking forward to the discussion. And at the end of the day, it's a council decision. And I think, I want to bring it down those we can, and like I mentioned, there are good reserves there. Council has been, past councils have been fiscally responsible and have put money aside, so I think it's time to maybe just take some of that money that's aside or put less in reserve this year, and then next year when things come back and people get back on their feet, then we could look at increasing that tax rate to what it really needs to be. But I don't think this year, this year is difficult, and we need to give everybody, a hand, or that helping hand they need to be able to get up and get going again.
Not being out of the pandemic yet, though, is there not obviously a risk that by not contributing as much to those reserves, the city puts themselves in a bit of a dangerous position that could lead to quite a high tax rate next year as well? Is it a gamble essentially either way?
You could see it that way. Next year is, we don't know, like, it's hard with the pandemic. Like next year we could be in a better situation and in a worse. So and next year there's another council, there's elections too coming next year, another whole new council, or maybe the same depending on the results. But I don't like looking down. I don't like 5-year plans. I don't like, because you can't anymore. And the pandemic had shown us that, like, you can't. Let's plan for tomorrow, but not plan for next year. So, and COVID had taught us that, and we're gonna get out of it. And then once we get out of it, but like I said, we're lucky. There is money there. The reserves has been built up, and tough decisions have been made, and we have that flexibility to bring it down a bit more. So let's bring it down a bit more if possible, and if I can convince my colleagues, and from there, next year, maybe bring it up a bit, depending on where we are and the financial state of the city. And so many things change in a year now that it's hard to predict what will happen next year.
You mentioned obviously earlier on that you were a councillor out in Clarence-Creek, Ward 5, and now you live on the border of Ward 1 and 2, and you're representing Ward 2 since you were appointed. It gives you a pretty unique position to be able to sort of see the trials and tribulations of both the more urban and the more rural areas of this rather vast municipality when you think about it. What do you think some of the main clashes are between the two, and how, with your sort of unique perspective, is it the best way to go about resolving them?
That's a very good question, and it's been raised, in the past. And for somebody for people living in the rural area, there's not enough investments in the rural area. For people living in the urban area, there's too much investment in the rural area. So, that's why we have four councillors in rural, 4 councillors in the urban area to balance it.
Do you think it needs to stay that way?
I think it definitely needs to stay that way.
Do you think there could be because I know we look at Alfred Plantation here just down the road, who have just voted to reduce their council. Do you think it's something that could happen here, reduce that size, or do you think that representation, that equal representation in terms of faces, in terms of councillors, is actually very important for the city?
No, the two answers here. Reduce the councillors, yes. Even back in 2003, I raised the question. I find we're a lot on the table for 20,000 people. Maybe 3, but 3 from the rural, 3 from the urban, and have it, I'd like to see it wide open. So not have wards, but have like 2 big wards, one rural, one urban, and have 3 councillors in that. 3 councillors to be elected in the rural, 3 councillors in the urban, and I think that would help because right now you have rural fighting against urban, urban fighting against rural, but you also have rural fighting against rural. Because back in the old township of Clarence-Rock, the old township of Clarence, you have four parishes or 4 quatre paroisses. You have Hammond, Bourget, Saint Pascal, and Clarence. Mm-hmm. So even back in the days before amalgamation, there were not arguments, but there was the term I'm looking for is
debates
between
heated discussions
between the 4. But I think having been there and having been here, I can appreciate those debates. What's a priority for someone, a councillor in the rural, is not necessarily what it is in the urban area, but it's as important. Road maintenance in the rural is very important because the state of the roads are not what they are here. You still have a lot of gravel roads in Bourget, Saint Pascal, Hammond, Clarence-Creek. So they want, residents want to have the grader there. Mm-hmm. Whereas, in the city of Rockland, in the urban area, it's speeding, it's crosswalks, it's garbage collection, it's water and sewer rates. So it's different dynamics, but I think being from the rural, and now I can appreciate my colleagues at the table when they feel that the money invested for a grader is important. Mm-hmm. I don't need the grader here, but I know that he needs it over there for the roads. So no, it's I think I bring an added value in that sense.
Do you think this is something that might end up being a topic of conversation in the build-up to next election, or is that too soon in terms of that sort of maybe reduction of size, or is it something really a conversation to be started by the next council?
I think it's a conversation that needs to be started by the next council.
And maybe look at 4 years after that if that's a decision that's been made.
Yeah, because I think the municipal act, or I know the municipal act, we cannot make a decision for another council coming. So it's something that next council could look at and then decide on it, I think a few years before elections.
A lot of interesting things coming up, Mr. Sear. Just before letting you run, I think this is a nice introductory interview, gives people a lot of insight into you, but just over the next 12 months, obviously, whilst you're in before the next election comes out, what is it you're really hoping to try and accomplish? And I know you hinted at it and basically said it earlier, are we likely to see your name on the ballot sheet next year?
Well, it's getting out there and meeting people from Ward 2. It's helping businesses, families, and that's where I'm pushing for a lower tax rate to get back on their feet from COVID. COVID, we talked about how the impact it had on families, but it also had a huge impact on businesses. So, doing what we can to help them, community organizations. I'm part of a number of community organizations, and we haven't fundraised in the past 2 years. Mm-hmm. Our coffins are empty. And every month when we meet, either virtually or we just started in person, we still have those requests for funds. Mm-hmm. So, as a councillor, I want to see what is possible for us to do to help these organizations. Can we give them a break on a hall rental? It's just $100, but it's $100 that they can use to give to somebody else in need. So that's, it's what are the mechanisms I could put in place, or council could put in place rapidly to get businesses, citizens, and community organizations back on their feet. Mental health is something that's dear to my heart. I know it's not of municipal jurisdiction. However, I'd like to see more services for the people of Clarence-Rockland. Be it a partnership with Valoris or a partnership with a community organization, maybe just a building that we could rent out for them. Because people are coming out again, COVID, people are magani, you know, they've, and it's mental health month, and stats show it, you know, people are struggling. So what can we do as a council to get people back on their feet, get businesses back on their feet, and help the community organization continue helping others? So basically that's my goal for this year, and then come next year, we'll see.
Is that a yes or a no, Kyle?
That's a yes, a big yes. It's not a secret, it's a big yes.
It's a big yes.
It's just to decide where, but yeah, it's a big yes.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for your time today. Lovely to meet you in person, and looking forward to chatting again very soon.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
And thank you very much for watching. Hope you found this a little bit insightful as well. Got to know your new councillor. Feel free to hunt for him on all the social medias and email addresses through the city now that the sort of technical issues there are starting to be resolved as well. So thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.
That was a good match.